My thumb stopped scrolling. There it was. His profile. His name. His message to someone else. The cold in my chest was absolute. A solid block of ice where my heart had been just seconds before. 3 months ago, I would have smiled at those same words. Let's rewind 20 minutes to 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was standing at the top of the landing in the dark, looking down into the living room where the 65-inch TV was flickering blue against the white walls. Mark was down there playing Warzone, screaming into a $300 headset about a gulag match. He sounded happy. Just a normal guy blowing off steam after a long day of meetings. I should have been screaming. I should have been running down those stairs to smash the device into his face. But instead, everything inside me went dead silent. It was like someone had turned the volume knob of my emotions all the way down to 0, leaving behind a weird humming clarity. My heart wasn't racing. It felt slow, heavy, like it was pumping sludge instead of blood. The only thing that felt real was the weight of the iPhone 15 Pro in my hand. He called it his client phone, strictly for real estate emergencies. He didn't know I had the passcode. And looking at the back of his head, I realized something else he didn't know. He thought he was the genius in this marriage because he brought in $200,000 a year, but he was sloppy. That cold robotic feeling? That was new. 3 months ago, I was a total mess. I remember standing in the driveway at 7:14 in the evening, staring at a scrunched up, black velvet scrunchie sitting on the passenger seat of his Audi Q7. It wasn't mine. I have short hair. I literally haven't owned a scrunchie since 2012. When I asked him about it, my chest felt like it was caving in, like all the air had been sucked out of the neighborhood. But Mark? He didn't panic. He didn't stammer. He got quiet. He leaned in close, lowered his voice to the soft, terrifying whisper, and said, "Babe, you borrowed my sister's car last week. Remember? That's probably hers." He looked at me with this pitying smile like I was a confused toddler. "You've been forgetting things a lot lately," he said, gently tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "Maybe you need to see Dr. Evans again about that anxiety prescription." I actually apologized to him. I stood there, shivering in the June heat, and apologized for finding another woman's hair tie in his $60,000 SUV. I felt crazy. But looking at that phone in my hand now, I wasn't crazy. I was just blind. Fast forward or rewind actually to a Sunday morning about 2 months ago. It was exactly 10:15 a.m. We were sitting on the beige sectional, the one we picked out together at Crate and Barrel, and he held my hands in his. He wasn't yelling. He was doing that soft, sad voice that makes you feel like the smallest person in the world. My stomach felt like it was filled with cold water. I was shrinking, literally feeling my presence evaporate from the room while he talked about trust and boundaries. He looked me dead in the eye. "Honey," he said, squeezing my fingers just a little too hard. "Good men are tired of being interrogated every time they walk through the door." That sentence hit me like a physical slap. I felt hot shame flooding up my neck, burning my ears. I was the problem. I was the nag. I nodded, staring at a microscopic coffee stain on the rug, and promised I'd book an appointment with Dr. Evans the next day. I actually thanked him for being patient with me. Later that same night, around 1:30 in the morning, I sat cross-legged on our bed with my MacBook Pro open, the screen brightness turned all the way down so I wouldn't wake him. The room was pitch black except for the glow illuminating my face. I felt hollowed out, like a shell of a person, just trying to figure out how to be human again. My fingers were trembling over the keyboard as I typed into Google, "Am I a narcissist for asking who called?" The search results were a mess of psychology blogs and Reddit threads, but I clicked every single one. I needed someone, anyone, to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. But the more I read, the more I felt that sick, sinking feeling in my gut like I was falling backward into a deep hole. I opened a new Google Doc and titled it Trigger Log. Mark said I needed to track my outbursts, so I started typing. Sunday, October 12th. Accused Mark of hiding phone. He was just charging it in the other room. I am paranoid. I am hurting him. Reading those words back to myself made my throat tight, like I was choking on my own guilt. I stared at the blinking cursor, watching it pulse like a tiny heartbeat. I was so busy trying to fix myself that I didn't notice the notification that popped up in the corner of the screen, a synced message from his iPad that he must have forgotten to disconnect. 2 days later at exactly 10:14 a.m., I was sitting across from Chloe at the Starbucks on 4th Street. She was staring at me over her $7 oat milk latte like I had grown a second head. I had just told her about the scrunchy incident, expecting her to help me figure out why I was so broken. Instead, she leaned in. "Elena," she whispered, intense and sharp, "that is textbook gaslighting. You need to check his credit card statements." I felt a sudden hot spike of irritation in my chest. Not at Mark, but at her. It felt like she was attacking a saint. My brain immediately pulled up the script he had drilled into me, the words feeling like a shield against her logic. "No, Chloe, you don't get it," I said, shaking my head with what felt like superior clarity. I'm projecting my past trauma onto his secure attachment style. Chloe just blinked. She looked at me with a heavy, terrifying silence. I took a sip of my coffee and felt a weird, twisted pride that I was finally doing the work. 3 weeks ago, Tuesday night, exactly 9:45 p.m., we were watching the season finale of Succession. His phone buzzed against the glass coffee table, vibrating hard enough to rattle the coasters. It was pure reflex. My eyes darted down to the lit-up screen for maybe half a second. Just a glance. I didn't even see who it was. But the air in the room instantly went sub-zero. My heart started hammering against my ribs, fast and erratic, like a trapped bird trying to break a cage. I stopped breathing. Every muscle in my body locked up because I knew I'd been caught. He didn't yell. Yelling I could handle. Instead, he slowly picked up the remote and hit pause, then came the sigh. A long, heavy exhale through his nose, like he was just so exhausted by how broken I was. He rubbed his temples, not even looking at me, and whispered, "I really thought we were past this, Elena." I felt 2 inches tall, desperate to disappear into the beige cushion. I was desperate to be fixed. I wanted Dr. Evans to crack open my brain and scrub out the crazy so I could be the wife Mark deserved. The office smelled like lavender and old paper, quite enough to hear the clock ticking on the wall. I sat on the edge of the velvet armchair, clutching my purse like a shield, and spilled everything. I told her about the hair tie. I told her about the time I asked why he changed his passcode. I told her how I accidentally saw a text from Pizza Hut at 2 a.m. that said Miss Ooh. I explained very carefully how Mark said my insecurity was turning his love into an obligation. "I just need tools to stop imagining things," I said, my voice shaking a little. I felt hopeful, like I was finally handing over a heavy backpack I'd been carrying for miles. Dr. Evans stopped writing. She put her pen down on her notepad, very deliberately, and looked at me over her glasses. The silence stretched out until my skin started to prickle. She leaned forward, her voice incredibly calm. "Elena," she said softly, "in these moments when you express fear, does he ever reassure you or does he only diagnose you?" I sat in the parking lot with the engine idling, staring blankly at the digital clock on the dashboard as it flipped to 11:05 a.m. My palms were sweating against the steering wheel, slipping slightly on the worn leather. Dr. Evans's question was stuck in my throat like a fishbone, sharp and impossible to swallow. "Does he ever reassure you?" I jumped so hard I hit my knee on the steering column when the Bluetooth system suddenly screamed at me. "Incoming call, Mark." The ringtone filled the tiny cabin of my Corolla, loud and demanding, bouncing off the glass. I pressed the answer button on the wheel, my chest feeling tight like I was underwater. "Hey," I squeaked. "Hey, babe," he said, his voice crystal clear through the speakers, way too big for the small space. "You out?" I told him yes. There was a silence on the line, heavy and expectant. So, he asked, the tone shifting just slightly, becoming sharper. Did you actually tell her the truth about your outburst on Tuesday? Or did you spin it to make yourself look like the victim again? The air in the car felt suddenly thin, and I struggled to pull in a breath. I stammered that I was honest, that I owned it just like we practiced. Good, he said, and I could hear him chewing something, maybe gum. I just want you to get better, Al. Then came the chuckle, low and dry. So, does she think you're crazy yet? I forced a laugh, but it sounded like a sob caught in a blender. Not yet, I lied, gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white. But for the first time, the word crazy didn't feel like it belonged to me. 1 week ago, Tuesday exactly 9:14 p.m., I was standing at the kitchen island, folding his black Gymshark shorts. My phone lit up on the marble counter. It was Chloe. Just an image attachment, no text preview. I wiped my hands on my leggings and tapped the screen. The colors were bright white and purple. Hinge. The photo was blurry, a screenshot of a screenshot, but I knew that Grey J. Crew half-zip. I bought it for him last Christmas for $88. Below the smiling photo, it just said, Mark, 34. A second later, a text bubble popped up. I found him on Hinge. The room suddenly felt like it was spinning sideways. Bile rose in my throat, hot and acidic, tasting like panic. No, that wasn't real. People steal photos all the time. It was a catfish. It had to be a catfish because if it wasn't, then everything he said about me was a lie. I heard the floorboards creak upstairs near the bedroom. Terror, cold and electric, shot through my veins. I didn't save the photo. I didn't reply. With shaking fingers, I swiped left and hit delete conversation. I scrubbed the evidence away like it was a stain on the counter. It was exactly 10:15 a.m. on Tuesday. My office door was shut and the blinds were drawn against the morning sun. I wasn't shaking anymore. The panic that had been drowning me for a week had solidified into something else entirely. Ice. I pulled my old iPhone 7 out of my bottom desk drawer. The screen was cracked in the corner, spider webbing across the glass, but it still worked. I popped in the Mint Mobile 7-day trial SIM card I'd bought at Best Buy for $2.99 on my way to work. It felt clinical, like I was prepping for surgery. I downloaded the app over the office Wi-Fi. I didn't use my photos. Mark is smart, but he's also predictable. I went to my college roommate's Facebook page and found her cousin Vanessa, who lives in Portland, Oregon. Vanessa is Mark's exact brand of kryptonite. 5'2". Dark hair, big brown eyes, looks like she volunteers at animal shelters but drinks whiskey neat. I took 4 screenshots. I cropped them carefully to throw off any reverse image search tools just in case he got suspicious. I named her Sophie. Under the My Simple Pleasures prompt, I typed, finding the best old-fashioned in the city. Mark considers himself a whiskey connoisseur. It was the perfect lure. I set the location radius to 1 mile, and I waited. I watched myself slice into the medium rare sirloin from Whole Foods, $22 a pound. The knife slid through the meat without resistance. It felt like I was watching a movie of someone else's life, projected onto a screen inside my head. The kitchen light seemed too bright, saturating everything in a yellow artificial haze. Mark was in a good mood. Actually, he was electric. He was talking about the Q3 sales figures, gesturing with his fork. 120% to quota, Al, he said, beaming. The Anderson deal finally closed at 4:30 today. He took a long sip of the Malbec we'd opened. That's a $15,000 commission check hitting next month. I smiled. The muscles in my face contracted automatically, like a reflex test at the doctor's office. That's amazing, babe, I said. My voice sounded hollow to my own ears, like it was coming from a speaker in another room. I wasn't really at the table. Part of me was suspended in the air near the ceiling fan, looking down at this nice, normal couple having a nice, normal Tuesday dinner. He stood up to clear his plate. As he walked past my chair, his hand landed on my shoulder. It was heavy and warm. He gave a gentle squeeze, the kind that used to make my stomach flutter, but now just made my skin go completely numb, like I'd been injected with Novocaine. "You seem better lately," he said, his voice smooth and satisfied. "Calmer, calmer." He leaned down and kissed the top of my head. "The therapy is really working, isn't it?" I just nodded, staring at my plate. He thought my silence was peace. He had no idea it was focus. The digital clock on the microwave flipped to 8:58 p.m. Mark rinsed his plate, the water rushing loud against the stainless steel sink for exactly 6 seconds before he shut it off. This was the ritual. He grabbed a liter of smart water from the fridge and cracked the seal, the plastic ring snapping sharply in the quiet kitchen. Then he looked at me, his eyes already drifting past my shoulder toward the basement door. "I'm heading down," he said, rolling his neck to the side until it made a wet popping sound. "Don't disturb me, okay? I'm playing ranked with the boys tonight. Needs full concentration." Ranked? That usually meant Valorant. It meant shouting into his $300 Astro A50 headset until 2 in the morning while I slept with earplugs. Or at least that's what I was supposed to believe it meant. I watched him descend into the basement, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind him with a finality that usually made me feel lonely. Tonight the house went quiet, but inside my chest there was a low, steady hum. It felt like the moment before the bass drops at a concert, that vibration that starts in the soles of your feet and rattles your teeth. I waited exactly 3 minutes to let him boot up his Alienware tower. Then, with steady hands, I pulled the burner phone from under the sofa cushion where I'd stashed it at 6:30. I unlocked the screen. Sophie had a new notification. The house had settled into that deep, heavy silence that happens around 11:30 p.m. I was upstairs, under the down comforter, the blue light of the burner phone illuminating the sheets like a secret. Downstairs, the basement was quiet. No shouting at teammates. No rapid-fire clicking of his mechanical keyboard. Just silence. My heart wasn't humming anymore. It was hammering against my ribs, a physical thudding that made my fingertips tremble as I tapped the app icon. Loading. The location services arrow flickered in the corner. I held my breath. First profile, Kyle, 28, holding a base. Swipe left. Second profile, some guy named Dave who really liked hiking. Swipe left. And then the air left the room. There he was. It wasn't a blurry selfie. It was the picture I took of him in Cabo 2 years ago, wearing the Ray-Bans I bought him for his birthday. Mark, 34. Under occupation, he put entrepreneur. I felt a cold, sharp spike of adrenaline hit my stomach, clearer and more potent than any coffee I've ever had. My eyes dropped to the bio. It was short, casual, looking for someone who doesn't take life too seriously. The phone felt hot in my hand. He wasn't playing ranked. He was shopping, and I was the one holding the receipt. My thumb hovered over the glass. It felt heavy, disconnected, like I was controlling a claw machine from a distance. Swiping right on my own husband felt like pulling the pin on a grenade and holding it against my chest. I flicked my finger. The screen exploded with digital confetti. "It's a match." The font was bubbly and cheerful, a stark contrast to the acid suddenly flooding my stomach. I stopped breathing. Literally. I just lay there in the dark, staring at the time in the corner of the status bar. 11:42 p.m. This was the choke point. If he was smart, if he had any survival instinct left, he'd spook. He'd see a girl this perfect, this local, and think catfish. Or he'd feel a pang of guilt. I watched the screen, waiting for his photo to vanish, waiting for the unmatch. I strained my ears for the sound of the basement door opening, for him to come rushing upstairs in a panic. But the house stayed dead silent. No footsteps. No shouted call-outs on Discord. Instead, a gray bubble appeared at the bottom of the chat window. 3 dancing dots. They pulsed rhythmically, hypnotic, and horrifying. He wasn't suspicious. He wasn't hesitating. He was typing instantly. The validation hit me like a physical blow to the ribs, a sick, triumphant ache that made my head spin. He wasn't just browsing. He was hungry. The 3 dots vanished. The message bubble popped into existence with a cheerful ding that sounded like a gunshot in the silent bedroom. I stared at the words. My vision tunneled until the rest of the room, the beige walls, the framed wedding photo on the dresser, the pile of laundry I'd folded at 7:15 disappeared into gray static. The phone screen was the only thing in the universe. You have incredibly kind eyes. My last ex had cold eyes. Crazy how much that matters. My thumbs stopped hovering. The cold in my chest was absolute, a solid block of ice where my heart had been just seconds before. 3 months ago, I would have smiled at a compliment like that. I would have melted. Now I just felt a strange, detached curiosity, like I was watching a car crash in slow motion. My last ex. He was talking about me. He was talking about the woman currently lying 20 feet above his head, wearing the t-shirt he got from a tech conference in Austin in 2019. The woman who spent 2 hours making his favorite lasagna tonight because he said he'd had a rough week with investors. Cold eyes? The rage didn't burn hot. It didn't make me want to scream or throw the phone. It crystallized. It made everything sharp and high definition. I looked at the time, 11:53 p.m. I remembered the last time he looked me in the eye. It was yesterday morning when he asked if I'd transferred the rent money for the storage unit. He hadn't seen coldness then. He saw a resource. He saw an ATM that also did laundry. My fingers moved across the keyboard, steady and precise. I wasn't Elena anymore. I was Sophie. And Sophie was about to ruin his life. That sounds intense, I typed back. Tell me more about her. I slipped out of the warm bedroom and hovered at the top of the stairs. The hallway floorboards were freezing against my bare feet, but the cold felt good. It felt clarifying, sharpening the fuzzy edges of my panic into a weapon. From the basement, the synthesized announcer voice of Valorant drifted up through the floorboards, loud and distinct. Allie slain. That was the cue. I knew the rhythm of this game as well as he did. He was dead for the round. Spectating. Usually this is the part where he'd be screaming into his headset, blaming his team Sage for not healing him or yelling about hit reg issues. But tonight, the mechanical keyboard was silent. No frantic WASD clicking, no mouse slamming. Instead, in the gaps between the in-game explosions, I heard it. The soft, rapid-fire tap-tap-tap of thumbs hitting a glass screen. Then a laugh. It wasn't his loud, boisterous, I just clutched the round roar. It was low. Deep a little. For the specific, curated laugh he uses when he wants someone to think he's charming. My pulse didn't race. It slowed down. The game wasn't a hobby tonight. It was audio camouflage. He was using the constant noise of gunfire and ability procs to cover the silence of his betrayal. He was using the 2-minute death timers to build a new life. It was efficient. It was calculated. And he had no idea I was listening to every keystroke. I backed away from the stairs. Every step was silent, calculated. I moved back into the bedroom, closing the door until the latch clicked softly, a sound barely louder than a breath. The room was still dark, lit only by the street lamp outside slicing through the blinds, painting stripes of orange light across the duvet. I didn't turn on the lamp. I didn't need to see. I knew where everything was. I walked to the closet and pulled out his black duffel bag, the Nike one he uses for the gym he hasn't gone to since February. I moved with surgical precision. No frantic throwing of clothes. No tears. Just efficiency. I opened his drawer. 3 pairs of jeans. 5 t-shirts. The expensive button-down he wore to his sister's wedding. I folded them neatly. I packed them like I was sending a child off to camp. It felt strange, packing his life away while he was downstairs laughing at my jokes on a screen. Like an out-of-body experience. I reached for his favorite hoodie, the gray oversized Champion one with the bleach stain on the cuff. He lived in that thing. He said it was his lucky charm. I held it for a second. The fabric was soft, worn thin at the elbows. Then my hand moved on its own. I didn't put it in the bag. I walked over to the small wicker trash bin by the vanity and dropped it in. He wouldn't need luck where he was going. I zipped the bag. It was light, maybe 15 pounds. That was the sum total of what he'd get to keep. I slid it deep under the bed, behind the storage bins of winter coats, hidden, ready. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Sophie had a new message. I picked up the phone again. The screen glowed in the dark room, cool and indifferent against my palm. I opened the Uber app. My fingers hovered over the destination bar. I typed it in, 2008 Maplewood Drive, his mother's house. It was 45 minutes away in light traffic, a straight shot out of the city and into the quiet, judging suburbs where nothing bad ever happened. The app suggested an UberX. $14.20. Reasonable. Practical. I scrolled past it. I scrolled past the comfort option. I stopped at Uber Black. $87.50. A small, tight smile pulled at the corner of my mouth. It felt sharp. I hit confirm. The little black car icon appeared on the map, spinning, searching. Driver Michael, arriving in 4 minutes. $87 for a one-way trip to nowhere? I wasn't paying for it. Not really. I switched apps to Venmo. I typed in the amount, $87.50. In the memo line, I didn't write Uber. I wrote moving expenses. I didn't hit request yet, and just let it sit there, glowing like a promise. He always bragged about how he liked premium experiences. Well, he was about to get one. Downstairs, the basement floorboards creaked. The game volume dipped. Silence. Then my phone buzzed again. Sophie had another message. So, does this ex still live with you, or is the coast clear? I stared at the screen. Is the coast clear? The audacity of it didn't make me hot. It made me cold. A deep glacial freeze that started in my chest and spread out to my fingertips, numbing everything but my focus. He was sitting 20 feet below me, beneath the floorboards, asking if I was asleep so he could verify if he was safe to cheat. He wanted to know if the obstacle me was out of the way. I didn't hesitate. My thumbs hovered over the glass, steady as a heart surgeon's. I wasn't Elena anymore, the girl who cried when he forgot our anniversary. I was the architect of his ruin. I tapped out the words slowly, savoring the shape of them. Crazy, I typed. My ex used to say I had kind eyes too. I watched the cursor blink. A tiny, rhythmic pulse. I added the kill shot. Want to come upstairs and tell me more about it? My finger pressed the blue arrow. Sent. Delivered. I set the phone down on the duvet and listened. The silence in the basement wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the silence of a man realizing the walls are closing in. The house held its breath. I counted the seconds. 1, 2. Downstairs, the steady, rhythmic thud-thud-thud of digital gunfire vanished. It didn't fade out or lower in volume. It was severed. He had ripped the headphones off. The silence that rushed in to fill the vacuum was louder than the shouting on his screen had ever been. Oppressive. It was a physical weight pressing up against the floorboards. I could picture him perfectly. Frozen in his $300 ergonomic chair, the blue light of the monitor washing over a face draining of color. His eyes scanning that text message again and again. Upstairs, I heard the distinct screech of caster wheels rolling backward over the plastic floor mat. sharp, jerky. Then the soft, suffocated sound of breath being held. He wasn't breathing. He was listening. He was waiting to hear footsteps or a laugh. But I gave him nothing. I just sat on the edge of the bed, perfectly still, letting the silence scream for me. The floor creaked. He was standing up. I didn't turn to look at the door. I just watched his reflection in the mirrored closet doors opposite the bed. The hallway light spilled in first, a sharp yellow rectangle cutting across the dark carpet. Then came the shadow. Then him. He stood in the doorway, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. The swagger he usually wore like a second skin was gone. His shoulders were hunched up near his ears, defensive, tight. He was still holding the PlayStation controller in his left hand. It dangled by his side, the little blue light on the back blinking slowly, searching for a connection it had lost. Like a confused child who forgot to put his toys away before getting in trouble. Elena. His voice was thin, brittle. It cracked on the second syllable. I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence stretch, pulling it taut until it hummed in the air between us. I smoothed their wrinkle in the duvet. Calm. Precise. Finally, I looked up. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just looked at him with the blank, terrifying neutrality of a judge who has already signed the warrant. "You're up late," I said softly. "Did you lose?" He opened his mouth to launch the defense. "Elle, listen, it's just a bot." The lie was so lazy it was almost insulting. I didn't let him finish. I didn't scream. Screaming implies passion, and I was fresh out of that. I just raised my left hand, palm out. "Stop." The word died in his throat. I looked down at my phone. The screenshots were already selected. 12 of them. A complete catalog of his betrayal, time-stamped and organized. I hit the share icon, then airdrop. The little radar circles rippled outward on my screen, searching for a target. There he was, Marky's iPhone. Even his Bluetooth name was childish. I tapped his icon, sending sent. A second later, the phone in the pocket of his gray sweatpants lit up. Ping. He flinched like I'd thrown a brick at him. He pulled the phone out, his thumb fumbling, sliding over the glass. The notification took up his whole screen. Sophie would like to share 12 photos. His face went the color of old ash. "Accept it," I said, my voice flat. "You're going to want to keep those for your lawyer." He stood there frozen, the blue light of the notification casting a ghostly glow on his chin. He couldn't press decline. He couldn't press accept. He was just glitching. I didn't wait for him to reboot. I simply pointed a finger toward the dark corner of the room, past the dresser. He followed my hand, his neck turning stiffly like a rusty hinge. There they were, 3 suitcases. His black Samsonite carry-on, the duffel he takes to the gym, and 2 heavy-duty garbage bags cinched tight with yellow ties. "Everything you own is in there," I said. My voice wasn't angry. It was the voice of a rental agent doing a final walkthrough. I packed the PlayStation first. He blinked, trying to process the logistics of how his life had been dismantled while he was sitting downstairs thinking he was getting lucky. I glanced at my watch. 9:08 p.m. "You should probably grab those now," I said, checking an app on my phone. "Your Uber is idling in the driveway. It's a gray Toyota Sienna." He looked at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. He wanted to argue about the cheating or the house or the relationship, but I hit him with the one thing his cheap, practical brain couldn't handle. "Go," I said, nodding toward the window. "It's already charging you for wait time." He grabbed the handle of the Samsonite first. It was heavy, clunky. I'd packed it efficiently, maximizing the misery. He hoisted the gym bag over his shoulder, the strap digging into his t-shirt, and then, with zero grace, dragged the 2 garbage bags across the hardwood floor. Scritch, scratch. He stopped at the threshold of the front door, panting slightly, trying to muster some dignity from the wreckage. He turned back. The classic Mark pivot. He put on his concerned logic face, eyebrows pinched together like he was solving a math problem. "You know you're acting crazy right now, right?" he said, his voice dropping to that patronizing register he used when he thought I was PMsing. "This is manic, Al. You need help." I actually laughed. A short, bright sound that bounced off the hallway walls. It felt lighter than air. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms, watching him struggle with the hefty bag of his own bad choices. "Funny you should say that," I said, a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. "I saw Dr. Evans yesterday." "Double session." He blinked. "Dr. Evans said my only issue was tolerating liars." I reached past him and opened the door, letting the humid night air rush in. "I'm cured now." The deadbolt slid home with a heavy, satisfying thunk. I pressed my forehead against the cool wood for a second, just listening to the fade of the Sienna's engine as it pulled away. Then silence. Absolute glorious silence. My knees suddenly felt like water, that post-fight adrenaline dump. It's weird how your body holds you up perfectly straight while you're dismantling someone's life, then drops you the second they're gone. My hands were vibrating, a low-frequency hum under the skin. I pushed off the door and walked toward the living room, my steps heavy on the carpet. The room was dark, except for the little LED ghosts of the cable box in the router. And one other thing. On the beige cushion of the sectional, right where Mark's ass had been planted for 6 hours, something was pulsing. His headset. A bulky black Turtle Beach rig. The little light on the boom mic was blinking a steady, rhythmic green. Blink. Blink. He'd dropped it when I started reading the texts, and in his panic to grab the PlayStation, he'd left the ears behind. I picked it up. It was still warm, and then I heard it. A tiny, tinny voice squawking from the foam cups. The chat was still live. I really shouldn't have. But my hands moved on their own, sliding the headset over my ears. "Yo, Kilowatt? You there? We need a revive on B, bro. Stop camping." The voice was loud, distorted by cheap compression. It was probably Kyle, one of those faceless avatars Mark spent his weekends with. Instead of fixing the drywall in the guest room, I adjusted the boom mic, the foam scratching my cheek. It felt like holding a grenade with the pin pulled. "Mark's offline," I said. My voice sounded strange in the feedback loop, amplified and icy. Permanently. I didn't wait for the, who is this? I ripped the headset off and dropped it onto the carpet. Then I reached behind the TV stand. My fingers found the warm, dusty back of the console he'd bought with our joint account tax refund. I yanked the HDMI cable. Then the power cord. The machine gave a pathetic little beep and died, but the house still felt connected. Too loud. I traced the yellow Ethernet cable back to the Spectrum router, blinking frantically in the corner. I didn't just power it down. I grabbed the main plug and ripped it from the wall socket. The green lights vanished instantly. No signal. It took exactly 14 days for the silence to break. Tuesday, 7:15 p.m. The doorbell didn't even startle me this time. I opened it to find Mark standing on the welcome mat, looking like he'd slept in his car. He was holding a plastic-wrapped bouquet, mostly dyed carnations and stiff baby's breath. I could see the bright orange $9.99 sticker still stuck to the bottom of the crinkly cellophane wrapper. Kroger's finest. He started talking before I could even lean against the doorframe. "L, please. I've been sleeping on Kyle's couch." He ran a hand through his hair, a calculated move to look boyish and distressed. I panicked, okay? We were getting so serious. The house, the joint account. I got scared of how real it was. I watched his mouth move. It was like watching a rerun of a show I used to love, only to realize the acting was terrible. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt the way you feel when you're stuck in traffic behind a Honda Civic with a broken muffler. Just bored. My heart rate didn't even jump. Is that it? I asked, looking past his shoulder at the street lamp flickering on. Elle, I love you, he tried, thrusting the sad flowers toward me. A single petal fell off a dying yellow carnation and landed on his shoe. He shifted his weight, the plastic wrapper crinkling loudly in the quiet evening. Crinkle, crinkle. He was searching my face for the old Elena, the one who would have melted at the sight of his slumped shoulders and the performative exhaustion. God, Elle, he whispered, shaking his head like he was the victim here. Your eyes? They're so cold. I took a slow breath. It didn't feel cold inside my chest. It felt like clarity. It felt like the first time you put on prescription glasses and realize the blurry green blobs are actually trees with individual leaves. My pulse was a steady, slow drum in my ears, completely unbothered by his panic. I looked down at the pathetic bouquet, then squarely into his pupils. My eyes aren't cold, Mark, I said softly. The words didn't need volume to carry weight. They're just open. I didn't wait for him to process it. I didn't wait for the sputtering protest or the next lie about how scary commitment is. I stepped back and pushed the heavy oak door forward. I didn't slam it.